What would you do if your sailboat lost a critical part of its design? Replace it, right? Well, we've made a bold decision. We're removing it for good. When it comes to boats, no two are exactly alike. Hull shapes, rigs, and even the types of keels make each vessel uniquely suited for its purpose. From full keels to fin keels, from dagger boards to centerboards, each design has its strengths and its quirks. Saoirse, our 35-foot Pearson, was originally designed with a centerboard that we could raise and lower from the cockpit. It was meant to help her point into the wind, provide more stability at sea, and prevent her from slipping leeward in the water. But the last time we hauled out, 3 years ago in Curacao, we found a problem. Oh no. The culprit? The centerboard. We discovered that the cavities surrounding the centerboard pin had been secretly leaking water into our keel whenever rainwater filled them. The fiberglass had delaminated, so we patched up the damaged areas with new fiberglass. Problem solved. Or so we thought. Shortly after the repairs, we sailed 500 nautical miles from Curacao to the US Virgin Islands. It was an exceptionally rough start, and about 10 hours into the journey, Saoirse suddenly listed hard from starboard to port. Once we arrived in the USVI's, Beau dove the anchor to make sure we were set, as usual, and that's when we discovered the shocking truth.
So, our centerboard is literally cracked and most of it's gone.
What? Half of the centerboard was gone. With no other choice, we removed the broken remains and hoped we could address the issue later. Now, with the experience of sailing with the centerboard for 3 years and without it for another 3, we've come to a surprising conclusion. We don't need it. While this decision may raise some eyebrows, we've chosen to permanently close the centerboard slot and move on. For us, it's a step toward simplifying Saoirse's design and improving her performance.
Next project up is gonna be sealing up this centerboard hole. Gonna actually grind away from the inside out at a 45, probably about 1/4 of an inch. That way I get a lot of 1708 and epoxy on the bottom of this thing, because just in case we ground, don't want my repair ripping out. It's gonna be lots and lots of dust and grind. A few years back we lost our centerboard. Well, we didn't really lose it, it got snapped off. We don't know what hit us, a whale, who knows, something hit us, had to have been a whale, and snapped it off right here at the centerboard trunk. We've been sailing without it since then and haven't had any issues. We get a little bit of slippage, but we just compensate for it. So instead of leaving this open and causing a lot more drag, we're gonna seal this up now that we have the opportunity. Yesterday I went ahead and cut half of it. I'm creating a chamfer in there, so then I can put up some honeycomb and fill that gap, and then just lay 1708 over top of it and build up the layers and just make it all nice and solid. I'll probably put quite a bit of glass on there, so I'm gonna have to do it in stages. That way it doesn't heat up too much. But today I gotta cut out the other side using the Sawzall, and then take the grinder through all of it and get it all nice and smooth, ready for glass. So we had a little bit more water in this cavity. I'm thinking that it's leaking in through, actually from the centerboard trunk. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a pathway for the water to leak into where the lead is, the ballast. So by sealing all this up, I think we'll finally be on the right side of things. I am gonna leave it open for a couple weeks and let it dry out. So I'm just gonna grind and sand until then. If you guys ever heard of the 50-foot rule, that's what Saoirse is. If you're not familiar, the 50-foot rule is if the boat looks good from 50 feet away, it's good enough. She definitely has a lot of cosmetic issues. When we first bought the boat, all the gel coat was crazed. And instead of addressing it then, I just sanded it down, slapped some all grip primer on her, some all grip paint, and she's looked good. She's held up decent, kind of, since then. But now I'm finally taking care of it. If you look really close, you guys can see that the fiberglass is pitting and the gel coat is crazed and cracking. So I will be grinding it down using this bad boy. I know some of you guys are gonna be like,
no, don't use the grinder. Use a sander.
well, I am gonna finish with sanding. I'm just taking the majority of the layers off with the grinder. And then I'm gonna go back over it with 80 grit on the orbital. But this is gonna cut down my time a lot. Since the fiberglass is pitted as well, I'm not too concerned with the scalloping that I'm creating with this grinder. I'm only gonna sand it down a couple millimeters and then I'll go back through it all and fair it. Then I'll put a proper epoxy barrier coat from Total Boat on there. And then we'll get some bottom paint on.
So one of the good things about being on the hard is the boat's not moving. There's also no noise, at least most of the time. But that means I can sleep a little bit better, but it doesn't stop me from waking up in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock and proceeding to make my grocery list and go over all the things I have to do tomorrow. So, in order for me to stay asleep, I've been doing this thing, which you guys have maybe seen me doing lately, and that's Beam Dream. It's 1 scoop a night in my hot milk. I make a nice little hot chocolate, and I can ensure that I'm going to stay asleep, or at least fall back to sleep when I do wake up, which is pretty often. So what I like is that this is actually totally guilt-free, and it has all natural, just all natural sleep supportive ingredients. It's honestly like tucking my brain into bed and saying, you know what? No more midnight brainstorming. It's nice and warm. So now I can fall asleep and stay asleep. And if I do wake up, I can finally drift back to sleep with the Beam Dream. If I do not take it, I can totally tell the difference. My sleep isn't great. I definitely am not falling back to sleep, and I feel kind of groggy when I wake up, like just not refreshed. With Beam Dream, totally refreshed and can take on the day. I know 2025 is coming up and everyone's going to be like, new year, new you, with diet and exercise, but check your sleep. If you're not getting quality sleep, I don't know really how you can follow through with your diet and your exercise. So if you are looking for more sleep in your life, like I am, you can get 40% off site-wide. And all you have to do is click this link here or click on the QR code and enter Beau and Brandy in the code area at checkout. So I hope you guys try it out because sleep is so, so important. And I am so happy I'm finally getting some.
After modifying a garden hoe that I picked up from a local hardware store, I scraped the inside of the trunk. This broke loose all the crud that's been stuck up in there for years.
I cut out some nitacore. It's pretty thick stuff. I believe it's about 1 inch. And made it all pretty snug to fit up into this centerboard trunk. It'll be nice to have a solid backing to actually press the fiberglass up against. That way I can get a solid bond. But first I am going to use some thicken epoxy and put that around the edges and fill some of these voids that I've sanded through. Basically sanded through the hull and got to where the ballast is. So I want to fill those as well with thickened epoxy. That way, when I do lay the glass, it's all smooth and I have a decent contour. When I was doing the cutting and sanding, it's a little sloppy. So now I want to go back over with the thickened epoxy to clean it up a bit. I'll probably do another round of sanding to try to shape it better. That way, when I do lay the glass, it is nice and smooth and lays down properly. Got the centerboard trunk area all prepped and ready for glass. So what I did was I put up some nitacore and then I used thicken epoxy to make a seamless transition between the nitacore and the hull. And then I followed up with more thickened epoxy with some sanding compound just to make it a little easier to sand down, because when it's just straight up silica as the thickener, it makes it a little more difficult to sand. It just takes longer. You go through more sandpaper. So that way I've been able to shape it down to what I want. And then I followed up with the last coat of being fairing compound. I'm using the Total Boat fairing compound, and actually all these are Total Boat products. We've been using the Total Boat products almost since we started this boat journey. So I'm very confident in their epoxy and their fairing compounds. I just started using a scale, just a little scale, to mix out the fairing compound, because before I was kind of eyeballing it, but it should be a 1-to-1 volume ratio. And by doing so, I've actually improved the consistency of the fairing compound. It's like spreading on peanut butter. Now that this is all sanded and faired and smooth, it's a nice surface to lay down the glass. So I'll just be cutting out 1708 and laying up to 5 layers of 1708. I don't want to go over 5 layers because I don't want to get uncontrollable exotherm, which is basically overheating of the epoxy, and that would cause a lot of inconsistencies, voids, bubbling, overheating, cracking. Basically destroys the work that you're trying to do. So to avoid that, I don't want to build up too many layers. Just got done cutting up the 1708. I did it a little bit different. I cut it in 2 different directions, staggering between the different thicknesses as well. I started at 1 inch at a horizontal cut, and then I went to 1.5 on a vertical cut and varied it up to 3 inches. Also, I cut each section at 12-inch intervals because the centerboard area is so long. It would be way too hard to try to just glass it all up in one piece. So I chopped it up into pieces that are manageable. And I'm also varying the different portions where they lay down. I'll first start out at, I believe I cut 9 inches, and then every section after that will be 12-inch. And then when I go to the next thickness up, I start off at 6 inches and then 12 inches after that. That way I'm staggering where the cuts are, just to prevent any weakness where the two pieces of fiberglass are butting up. Now I'm gonna glass it up. I'm glassing it up with our friend Brian. He wanted to come and spectate and learn how to do this. So this is a pretty straightforward job, and it should be pretty easy to explain things.
I kind of use this as the metal thing you were talking about.
Right, yeah.
To try to make sure I get. If you have it.
Right here.
Yeah, if you could just push it up on it. Yeah, and the thing.
All right, drum roll on how last night's glassing went. It looks pretty good, actually. It's super solid. Rip off peel ply. Ooh, yeah, that's nice. We did a good job. Nice and solid. I don't see any air pockets either. So we did a good job laying it up. But as you can tell, there is quite a bit of void there. About, I'd say at least about 1.25 inches. So I am actually even more from going from the very center. So I'm actually gonna do another round of Nitacore. This is 1 inch, and this time I'll be glassing both ends of it. The first layer was just to seal up the centerboard. In hindsight, if I thought about it a little bit more, I would have actually sealed it up a little bit lower to get it a little closer to being flush with the bottom of the keel. But this will just make it stronger. There'll be more layers, so really it's just more work and more product. It will make it way stronger, so not a bad thing. Surprise.
Neighbor.
Close quarters.
That guy's really good.
Yeah. He knows his stuff.
nice pants. Are you modeling? Is that you modeling them? Love you match all the bearing compound colors today.
Gotta color coordinate. It helps.
Yeah. Yellow and blue make green. Yes, yellow.
It's more like puke.
Yeah. Is it weird that I love how this stuff smells?
Hmm?
Is it weird that I love how this stuff smells? Kind of reminds me of paste.
What?
Glue, paste. When I was a kid.
Paste.
Yeah. The stuff that you like to
As a
eat.
kid.
Yeah. Did you not? It had sugar in it.
Maybe I did. I don't remember.
Any special techniques that you do for this?
Gotta do it from different angles to try to force it into the holes. And try not to remove too much of it, because if you're trying to fill an area, then you'll press it out of the way. It's an art form.
You're a sculptor.
Pretty much. But you can't do it too thick because it won't cure properly.
After another round of sanding, the last thing to get the centerboard completely sealed is to lay up the final pieces of fiberglass. I'm cutting out 3 more layers of 1708 biaxial, altering the direction to keep with the same strong layup schedule. I asked for Brandy and Brian's help again to get this last layer on. It's much easier and quicker with 3 sets of hands, with each person on their assigned task. Brandy mixing epoxy, Brian wetting out the fiberglass, and me laying it down. When I glassed in the second round of honeycomb, it took me all day. But with their help, it'll only take a couple hours. And the moment of truth. Now it's time to peel off this peel ply and see how well we did. Well, the centerboard is officially sealed up. It actually came out really well. We did a good job. There's probably a few bugs permanently in Saoirse, but just add it to the collection. If you're not familiar with peel ply, it is the last layer I use when I'm using any sort of woven or biaxial fiberglass, actually even chop strand. It works really well at creating a nice finishing layer. It takes a lot of the imprint off, and it also eliminates the amines that collect at the surface. Now that that's all done, all I have to do is get some fairing compound down and get it all nice and smooth and ready for paint.